The unexpected encounter, Olivia Reed clutched her presentation portfolio against her chest, her heart hammering as the elevator climbed past floor 30. The botanical water filtration system she'd developed had consumed the last 4 years of her life. 4 years of research grants running dry, of colleagues dismissing her work as impractical, of her parents gently suggesting she find a real job. Today could change everything. Floor 42, announced the elevator's smooth voice. Olivia stepped out, her worn flat silent against the polished marble floor. The hallway stretched before her, all glass and steel and intimidating emptiness. Berkeley Investments had agreed to hear her pitch, a miracle considering how many doors had closed in her face. "You've got this," she whispered, checking the email on her phone. Suite 4220. Following the numbered suites, she reached a frosted glass door. With one deep breath, she pushed it open and stepped inside, not into a conference room, but a vast, minimalist office. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the San Francisco skyline, and at a desk of dark polished wood sat a man who was decidedly not the investment manager she was supposed to meet. "Excuse me, but this isn't a scheduled appointment," the man said, his voice quiet but commanding. He stood impossibly tall, dark hair swept back from a face that seemed carved from stone, handsome but severe. Olivia froze, recognition dawning. Dominic Hartwell, the tech genius who disappeared from public life 3 years ago, after revolutionizing renewable energy storage. The billionaire who now ran Hartwell Innovations from the shadows, rarely seen, endlessly speculated about. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, backing toward the door. "I was supposed to meet with Berkeley Investments. Suite 4220. A flicker of something amusement crossed his face. "Berkeley Investments is 4220 West Tower. This is East." Heat flooded Olivia's cheeks. "Of course. Different towers. I'll just go." She turned to leave, mortified. "Wait." His voice stopped her. "What's your pitch?" She turned back, confusion replacing embarrassment. "My pitch? You're clearly here to pitch something. Berkeley doesn't take meetings with people carrying homemade portfolio cases unless they're desperate or brilliant. Sometimes both." Olivia clutched her case tighter. "It's a botanical water filtration system, using genetically modified aquatic plants to remove contaminants from water sources in developing regions." Dominic Hartwell studied her for a moment, then gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Show me." "But your schedule?" "My schedule," he said, checking his watch, "just opened up for the next 30 minutes. Unless you'd rather race across to the West Tower and be 15 minutes late." Logic told Olivia to leave. Berkeley Investments might still hear her pitch if she hurried. But something in Dominic Hartwell's gaze, a challenge and interest, made her step forward instead. "It uses modified water hyacinth genetics," she began, opening her portfolio on his desk. "The plants can process industrial pollutants 40 times faster than conventional methods, at 1/8 the cost." As she spoke, spreading out her research papers and prototype designs, something shifted in the atmosphere. Dominic leaned forward, his questions incisive, challenging her assumptions, pushing her to defend her research. Not dismissive, engaged. "The implementation costs would be prohibitive," he said after 20 minutes of rapid-fire discussion. "Only with traditional manufacturing approaches," Olivia countered. "That's why I've designed a localized production model. Communities can grow their own filtration systems with minimal outside support." For the first time, a genuine smile transformed his face. "You're not just selling a product. You're offering independence. Clean water shouldn't be a luxury," she said simply. Dominic stood abruptly, walking to the window. "Berkeley won't fund this." Olivia's heart sank. "Why not?" He turned, backlit by the afternoon sun. "Because they're looking for quick returns. This is revolutionary, but it's also a long game." He paused, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I, however, specialize in long games." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that perhaps your getting lost today wasn't a mistake." He extended his hand. "Hartwell Innovations might be interested in developing your filtration system, Dr. Reed." Olivia stared at his outstretched hand, suddenly aware she stood at the edge of something momentous. "How did you know I have a doctorate?" His lips curved slightly. "The way you speak about genetic modification, only someone who's lived in that world would have that precision." He kept his hand extended. "Do we have something to discuss?" Olivia reached out, her smaller hand clasped in his firm grip. Neither could have known then how this accidental meeting would alter the course of their lives forever. The improbable proposition. The Hartwell Innovations executive boardroom fell silent as Olivia finished her presentation. She stood alone at the head of the obsidian table, surrounded by skeptical faces in expensive suits. The prototype of her botanical filtration system sat before her, a small, elegant terrarium containing genetically modified water lilies suspended in murky water that gradually cleared before their eyes. "This is fascinating work, Dr. Reed," said Patricia Winters, Hartwell's silver-haired CFO, "but it's not what we do. We're a tech company, not a botanical research facility." "With respect," Dominic's voice cut through the room as he entered from a side door. "Innovation isn't limited to circuit boards." He moved to stand beside Olivia, a gesture that wasn't lost on his executives. Dr. Reed's work represents exactly what Hartwell should be investing in: sustainable solutions with global application. Olivia felt the weight of every stare in the room. Just 3 days ago, she'd been contemplating moving back to her parents' home in Oregon. Now she stood in a room where the net worth of the occupants could fund a small nation. The R&D costs alone would be astronomical, argued Julian Ferris, head of development. His voice carried the practiced skepticism of a man used to shooting down ideas. "Not to mention the regulatory hurdles for genetically modified organisms in international markets." "I've reviewed Dr. Reed's research," Dominic interrupted. "The modifications use gene splicing techniques already approved in 47 countries. And as for R&D, I'm allocating resources from my personal innovation fund." A murmur rippled through the room. The Personal Innovation Fund was Dominic's infamous pet project budget, known for producing either spectacular failures or industry-changing breakthroughs. "We'll need lab space," Olivia said, finding her voice. "A small team, 6 months of runway to prove concept at scale." Patricia's eyebrow arched. "Confident, aren't you?" "I've spent 4 years developing this with university equipment and grant scraps," Olivia replied. "With proper resources, I can deliver a functional prototype for field testing within 6 months." Dominic nodded almost imperceptibly, approval flickering in his eyes. It settled then. Dr. Reed will head a new division, Hartwell Botanical Systems. Patricia arranged the budget transfers. "Julian, clear the North Lab space." The meeting adjourned with reluctant nods and whispered conversations. As the executives filtered out, Dominic gestured for Olivia to remain. "That went well," she said, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That went exactly as expected," Dominic replied, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "They'll resist anything new until it succeeds. Then they'll all claim they saw its potential from the beginning." Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, San Francisco lay shrouded in early evening fog, the lights beginning to glimmer through the mist. Olivia carefully packed her prototype, still struggling to process the surreal turn her life had taken. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked, looking up at him. "There are hundreds of promising technologies you could fund." Dominic studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. 3 years ago, I visited a village in Tanzania. The local water supply had been contaminated by a mining operation upstream. Children were dying." He turned toward the window. "I donated money for water treatment facilities. It helped that village, but the next village down still suffered. And my system could be implemented by the communities themselves." Olivia finished softly. "Exactly." He turned back to her. "Most solutions require constant outside intervention. Yours offers independence." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only when his assistant Naomi entered with the security badge and folder. "Your credentials." "Dr. Reed," Naomi said, her tone professionally cordial. "And the employment contract requires your signature." "Standard confidentiality clauses, intellectual property arrangements. The IP remains with Dr. Reed," Dominic interjected. "Hartwell gets exclusive licensing for commercial applications." Both women looked at him in surprise. Hartwell Innovations was notorious for its airtight IP acquisition from all employees. "That's unusually generous," Olivia said cautiously. "It's your life's work," he replied simply. "I'm investing in its success, not taking it from you." After Naomi left, Olivia scanned the contract, still wary of some hidden catch. "This salary, it's triple what I made as a research fellow." "It's what you're worth," Dominic said. "I expect results, Dr. Reed. I'm not running a charity." "Olivia," she corrected him. If we're going to work together, you should use my name. Something changed in his expression then, a softening around the eyes gone almost as quickly as it appeared. Olivia, then, and I'm Dominic, at least when we're not in front of the board. The next morning, Olivia arrived at her new lab, a space 3 times the size of her university department's entire facility. A small team had been assembled, 2 research assistants, a plant geneticist, and an engineer. Dr. Reed, the engineer, Theo Wong, greeted her with undisguised curiosity. Is it true you just walked into Dominic Hartwell's office and walked out with a multi-million-dollar project? Olivia set down her bag, smiling despite herself. Something like that. You should know, said Jasmine Patel, the geneticist. Hartwell hasn't launched a new division in 2 years, and he's never put an outsider in charge. The rumor mill says it's because you impressed him, Theo continued, but the executive floor is betting on how quickly you'll fail. Olivia looked around at the gleaming lab, the expectant faces of her new team, the weight of opportunity and skepticism pressing down equally. Then I suppose we'd better prove them wrong. Over the following weeks, Olivia immersed herself in the work. The lab became her second home, often finding her there long after the others had left. It was during one such late night that Dominic appeared in the doorway, watching her adjust the nutrient balance in a test tank. You know we have people who could stay late instead, he said, startling her. Olivia turned, pushing back a strand of hair that had escaped her messy bun. I like doing the work myself. Helps me think. He moved into the lab, studying the rows of tanks with their glowing plants. Any progress? We've increased filtration efficiency by 22%, she said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. And the plants are thriving in simulated polluted conditions from 3 different industrial profiles. Dominic nodded, but Olivia caught the slight distraction in his eyes. Is something wrong? The board is pressuring me to divert some of your resources to another project, he admitted. Julian believes your timeline is too optimistic. Of course he does, Olivia sighed, frustration evident. I've been here long enough to recognize a political play when I see one. Politics is the inevitable companion to power, Dominic said. Julian wants my job eventually. You're an unknown variable in his equation. And in yours? She asked before she could stop herself. His eyes met hers, intense and searching. You're still the most interesting mistake to walk into my office, Olivia Reed. Something shifted between them in that moment, a current that had nothing to do with professional respect and everything to do with the way the laboratory's soft blue light caught the angles of his face, or how for the first time she noticed a small scar near his eyebrow. I should get back to work, she said softly, breaking the spell. And I have a dinner meeting, he replied, stepping back slightly. The World Economic Forum is hosting an innovation summit next month. I've nominated your project for presentation. Olivia's eyes widened. That's huge, it is. So prove Julian wrong about that timeline. With that, he turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. And Olivia? Go home sometimes. The plants will survive without you for a few hours. As his footsteps faded down the corridor, Olivia turned back to her work. But her mind remained on the conversation, and the undeniable awareness that had flashed between them. A dangerous complication in an already complicated situation. She was here to change the world with her science, not to become another headline in the tabloid's endless speculation about Dominic Hartwell's personal life. Yet as she adjusted the microscope to examine a leaf sample, she couldn't help but wonder what other unexpected turns this serendipitous collision might take. Hidden depths rain lashed against the windows of Hartwell Tower, transforming San Francisco's skyline into a blurred watercolor. Olivia stood transfixed, watching lightning illuminate the bay while the prototype filtration system hummed quietly behind her. 3 months of intense work had produced results that exceeded even her optimistic projections. You should be celebrating, came Dominic's voice from the lab doorway. Olivia turned, unable to suppress her smile. The World Economic Forum presentation is still weeks away. Plenty of time for something to go catastrophically wrong. Always the scientist, he said, entering the lab. Gone was his usual immaculate suit. Instead, he wore dark jeans and a simple gray sweater. With his hair slightly disheveled from the rain, he looked almost approachable. Almost human. The latest test results came in, she said, gesturing to her tablet. Filtration rates are holding steady at 93% efficiency, across all contaminant profiles. The plants are reproducing at sustainable rates without becoming invasive. Dominic nodded, but something in his expression told her he hadn't come to discuss test results. I actually came to offer you a ride home. The storm's getting worse and the weather service just issued flash flood warnings for the downtown area. Oh. Olivia glanced at her watch, surprised to find it was already past 9. I suppose I lost track of time again. You always do, he said, the words carrying no judgment, perhaps even a hint of admiration. Grab your things. My car's waiting downstairs. 20 minutes later, they sat in comfortable silence as Dominic's driver navigated the rain-slick streets. The usual traffic had thinned. Most sensible people already home on such a turbulent night. This isn't the way to my apartment, Olivia observed as they turned onto the Embarcadero. No, it's not, Dominic agreed. I thought you might join me for dinner. I have a standing Friday reservation at Lunetta, small place on the waterfront. Best seafood in the city, and they're discreet. The implication that they needed discretion wasn't lost on Olivia. Is this a business dinner? His eyes, usually guarded, held hers with unexpected openness. Would you prefer it to be? Before she could answer, a tremendous crack of thunder shook the air, followed immediately by darkness sweeping across the buildings ahead. The driver slowed, peering through the downpour. Power outage, sir, he announced. Looks like it's affecting the whole waterfront district. Dominic sighed. Gerald, change of plans. Take us to the house instead. The house? Olivia questioned. My place, he explained. It's closer than your apartment and it has a generator. Unless you'd prefer to navigate a flooded city during a blackout. 20 minutes later, Gerald pulled through an unassuming gate that opened into a private drive, winding up one of San Francisco's famous hills. Unlike the ostentatious mansions of Silicon Valley's elite, Dominic's home was a modernist structure of glass and redwood that seemed to emerge organically from the hillside. Inside, subtle lighting activated as they entered, powered by what Olivia guessed was one of Hartwell Innovation's own renewable energy systems. The home was beautiful but surprisingly sparse. Minimalist furniture, few personal effects, walls adorned with abstract art rather than photographs. Not what you expected? Dominic asked, noticing her assessment. I'm not sure what I expected, she admitted. Something more extravagant? He smiled wryly. I spend enough time surrounded by glass and steel at the office. Olivia followed him through to an open kitchen where he moved with unexpected ease, pulling ingredients from a refrigerator. You cook? She asked, unable to mask her surprise. Another expectation shattered, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. I find it meditative. A problem with concrete steps and immediate results, unlike running a company. He handed her a glass of wine and began preparing a simple pasta dish, the domesticity of the scene striking in its contrast to their usual laboratory or boardroom interactions. Olivia found herself studying his hands, strong, precise movements that spoke of practice and patience. May I ask you something personal? She ventured as they moved to a dining table overlooking the stormy bay. You can ask, he replied, the ghost of a smile playing at his lips. Why did you withdraw from public life? 3 years ago you were everywhere. Magazine covers, technology conferences, television interviews. Then suddenly, nothing. Dominic was silent for a long moment, twirling pasta on his fork without eating it. 3 years and 2 months ago, my younger brother Thomas died of an opioid overdose. The simple statement hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken grief. I'm so sorry, Olivia said softly. We were extraordinarily close despite being very different people. He was the artist, the dreamer, everything I'm not. Dominic set down his fork. While I was building Hartwell Innovations, making my first billion, Thomas was struggling with addiction. I was so consumed with success that I missed the signs until it was too late. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating his face, the pain still raw beneath his composed exterior. The press coverage was brutal. Tech billionaire's brother dies alone while he attends Davos summit. They weren't wrong. His voice grew quiet. I was accepting an innovation award when Thomas took his last breath in a treatment center I'd paid for, but never visited. Understanding dawned on Olivia. So you disappeared. I withdrew, he corrected, stepped back from the spotlight to focus on what matters. The company serves a purpose beyond profit now. Every innovation we develop has to create meaningful impact. Like water filtration systems for developing regions, Olivia said. Exactly. He looked at her then, his gaze unguarded. Your work is precisely the kind of project Thomas would have championed. He always said I built things that made rich people's lives more convenient, while ignoring those truly in need. The revelation of this hidden depth, this private pain that shaped his public persona, shifted something in Olivia's perception of him. Not just a billionaire, not just a brilliant mind, but a man carrying profound loss and regret. Is that why you gave me a chance that day? Because of Thomas? Perhaps partly, he admitted. But mostly because in all my years running Hartwell, I've never seen someone speak about their work with such genuine conviction. No rehearsed pitch, no calculated angles, just pure belief in what you've created. Their conversation flowed more easily after that, moving from personal histories to philosophical debates about science, ethics, and responsibility. Olivia spoke of her childhood in rural Oregon, of parents who taught biology at a community college, of her early fascination with how plants could transform environments. They thought I was crazy when I left a prestigious research position to develop the filtration system, she confessed. 4 years of financial struggle, of being dismissed as idealistic and impractical. And now? Dominic asked. Now they're cautiously optimistic, she laughed. My mother still sends me job listings for university positions just in case. As the evening wore on, the storm gradually subsided, leaving behind a glistening city and cleared skies. They moved to the living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panorama of stars above the bay. I should probably go, Olivia said reluctantly, aware of how comfortable she'd become in his presence. It's late. Stay, Dominic said, the word simple but laden with meaning. Seeing her expression, he quickly added, the guest room, I mean. It's after midnight, the roads are still flooded, and you've had wine. That would be sensible, she agreed, though sensibility had little to do with her decision. Later, lying in the guest room's luxurious bed, Olivia stared at the ceiling, replaying their conversations. Something fundamental had shifted between them tonight. A barrier dissolved, revealing the person behind the persona. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. Dominic Hartwell was no longer just her benefactor or even her colleague. He was becoming something far more dangerous, someone she genuinely cared about. And in the quiet darkness, she admitted to herself what she'd been denying for weeks. The professional admiration, the intellectual connection, these were merely the foundation for feelings that had grown steadily stronger since that first accidental meeting. Feelings that could jeopardize everything she'd worked for. In the room down the hall, unknown to Olivia, Dominic too lay awake, confronting a similar realization. For the first time since Thomas's death, he had opened up to someone completely. For the first time in years, the walls he'd so carefully constructed had begun to crumble. And for a man who controlled every aspect of his life with methodical precision, this unexpected vulnerability was both liberating and terrifying, a serendipitous collision with consequences neither of them could predict. The precipice of lost morning light filtered through the laboratory's windows as Olivia made final adjustments to the prototype. In 1 week, she would present at the World Economic Forum in Geneva, introducing her filtration system to potential global partners. Everything was falling perfectly into place, perhaps too perfectly. The latest simulation results are outstanding, Theo announced, sliding a tablet across the workstation. 97% efficiency in the Bangladesh water profile. Even the most contaminated samples show complete remediation within 48 hours. Olivia scanned the data, a smile spreading across her face. Send these to Dominic right away. He'll want them for the investor packet. Jasmine, working nearby, exchanged a knowing glance with Theo. Dominic, is it? Not Mr. Hartwell anymore? Heat crept into Olivia's cheeks. In the month since that stormy night at his home, her relationship with Dominic had evolved into something difficult to define. Late-night strategy sessions that drifted into personal conversations. Working dinners where work gradually became secondary. Moments of charged silence where possibilities hung unspoken between them. We've been working closely on the presentation, Olivia replied, her tone professionally neutral. It's natural that formalities would drop away. Jasmine hummed skeptically. And I suppose the fresh flowers delivered to your office every Monday are also strictly professional? Before Olivia could respond, her phone buzzed with a message from Patricia Winters. Emergency board meeting called. Your presence requested immediately. Conference room. A flutter of anxiety rose in her chest. Emergency meetings were never good news. Conference room A was already filled with tense executives when Olivia arrived. Dominic stood at the head of the table, his expression more closed and severe than she'd seen in weeks. He barely met her eyes as she took a seat. Julian Ferris paced by the windows, agitation evident in every movement. "We need to address this immediately," he was saying. "The company's stock has already dropped 3 points since the news broke." "What news?" Olivia asked. Patricia slid a tablet toward her. On the screen was a business journal article with the headline, "Hartwell Innovations Accused of Biotech Espionage. CEO's Personal Project Under Scrutiny." Olivia's blood ran cold as she skimmed the article. According to an anonymous source, her filtration system was suspiciously similar to proprietary technology being developed by Nexus Bioengineering, a competitor, where she had briefly consulted 2 years earlier. "This is absurd," she said, looking up. "My work is completely original. Yes, I did a 3-week consulting job with Nexus, but their aquatic remediation program was using chemical processes, not biological ones. They're claiming you had access to classified research," Patricia said, "research that supposedly laid the groundwork for the exact genetic modifications you're using." "That's impossible," Olivia insisted. "I developed these modifications at the university, months before I ever set foot in Nexus. I have dated research journals, witness statements from my colleagues." "Regardless of the truth," Julian interrupted, "the perception is damaging. Hartwell is being portrayed as a corporate thief, using an unsuspecting scientist as cover." He turned to Dominic. "We need to distance ourselves from this project immediately." Dominic had remained silent, his expression unreadable. Now all eyes turned to him, awaiting his decision. "The timing is suspicious," he finally said, 1 week before a major international presentation that would establish Hartwell as a leader in sustainable technology. "You think this is deliberate sabotage?" Patricia asked. "I think," Dominic replied carefully, "that successful innovations attract predators. Nexus has been losing market share for 3 consecutive quarters. They're desperate." Hope flickered in Olivia's chest. He believed her. Despite the damning accusations, he trusted her integrity. "What do you suggest we do?" Julian demanded. "Proceed as planned," Dominic stated. "Our legal team will issue a strong denial and demand evidence of their claims. Dr. Reed will continue preparing for Geneva." Julian's face darkened. "This is a mistake. Your personal involvement is clouding your judgment." The implication hung heavy in the air. Olivia felt every gaze in the room shift between her and Dominic, assessing, speculating. "My judgment is perfectly clear," Dominic said coldly. "This meeting is adjourned." As the executives filed out, Dominic gestured for Olivia to remain. When they were alone, his rigid posture softened slightly. "I'm sorry about this," he said quietly. "Corporate warfare is rarely fair or clean." "Thank you for believing me," she replied, relief evident in her voice. "Of course I believe you," he said, moving closer. "But we need to be prepared. Nexus won't back down easily, and Julian will use any opportunity to undermine you and by extension me." "Because of us?" she asked, finally addressing the unspoken current that had been building between them. Dominic's eyes met hers, vulnerability briefly visible beneath his composed exterior. "Is there an us, Olivia?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Before she could answer, his assistant Naomi entered with urgent messages. "Breaking the moment, we'll talk later," he promised, squeezing her hand briefly before returning to his professional demeanor. Later never came. The next 3 days became a blur of legal consultations, evidence gathering, and frantic preparation for Geneva. Olivia barely saw Dominic, their communication reduced to terse emails and brief status updates. On the 4th day, Olivia arrived at her lab to find Julian waiting for her, a thin smile on his face and a folder in his hand. "Dr. Reed," he greeted her, "I believe I've discovered something interesting about your time at Nexus." "I have nothing to hide," she replied evenly. "Really?" He removed a document from the folder. "Then perhaps you can explain why your security badge accessed their restricted genetics lab at 2:17 a.m. on March 12th, 2 years ago? Long after your consulting hours." Olivia's stomach dropped. "That's impossible." The records are quite clear," Julian continued, triumph in his voice. "And coincidentally, their backup server was accessed that same night. Files were copied, files containing early research on aquatic bioremediation. This is fabricated evidence, Olivia insisted, her mind racing. I never accessed any restricted areas or servers. The board won't see it that way, Julian said smoothly, especially when paired with the remarkable similarities between their proprietary gene sequences and yours. He handed her another document, complex genetic code with highlighted sections. 94% match in these segments. Olivia examined the genetic data, her scientific mind immediately spotting the manipulation. These are common water hyacinth sequences, not proprietary modifications. Anyone could have... She stopped, sudden understanding dawning. You're behind this. Julian's smile didn't waver. That's a serious accusation, Dr. Reed. I'm merely following the evidence where it leads. What do you want? She demanded. Resign from the project, he said simply. Publicly state that you're stepping away to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Dominic will have no choice but to cancel the Geneva presentation. And if I refuse, then these documents go to the board this afternoon. Your reputation will be ruined and you'll drag Dominic down with you. His voice lowered. Everyone's noticed how close you two have become. The board already questions his judgment where you're concerned. Olivia felt physically ill. This wasn't just about her project anymore. It was about destroying Dominic's credibility within his own company. Julian had calculated perfectly, using their growing personal connection as a weapon. I'll give you until 5 o'clock, Julian said, heading for the door. Make the right choice, Dr. Reed. The hours that followed were the most agonizing of Olivia's life. She tried repeatedly to reach Dominic, but he was in closed-door meetings all day. Her calls went unanswered, her messages unread. At 4:30, she made her decision. Sitting alone in her office, she composed her resignation letter, clinical, professional, with no hint of the turmoil behind it. She would not allow Julian to use her as a weapon against Dominic. Better to remove herself from the equation entirely. As she prepared to send the letter, her office door opened. Dominic stood there, his face taut with suppressed emotion. Were you going to tell me? He asked, his voice unnaturally controlled. Tell you what? She asked, closing her laptop to hide the resignation letter. He tossed a folder onto her desk, identical to the one Julian had carried earlier. About your late-night activities at Nexus, about the stolen research. Shock rendered her momentarily speechless. You can't possibly believe this. What I believe, he said coldly, is that I should have listened to Julian from the beginning. He warned me that your project was too good to be true, that I was letting personal feelings cloud my judgment. Dominic, these documents are fabricated. Julian is setting me up to what? He interrupted. To discredit you? Why would he bother? You were nobody before I gave you this opportunity. The words struck like physical blows. Olivia stared at him, searching for any trace of the man who had opened up to her that stormy night, who had shared his pain and his dreams. All she found was the cold, distant CEO she had first encountered, walls rebuilt stronger than before. You're right, she said quietly. I was nobody, just a scientist who believed in her work, who believed in changing the world. She stood, gathering her dignity around her like armor, and who made the mistake of believing in you. She handed him the resignation letter she'd printed earlier. You'll have my clearance badge by morning. The project documentation is all on the secure server. Your team can continue without me. For a fleeting moment, something like regret flickered in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the impassive mask he showed the world. I'll have security escort you out, he said, turning to leave. Dominic, she called after him, one last attempt to breach the chasm that had opened between them. Ask yourself why Julian brought this to you today, 1 week before Geneva. Ask yourself who benefits if the presentation never happens. He paused at the doorway, shoulders rigid. Without turning, he said, Goodbye, Dr. Reed. As the door closed behind him, Olivia sank into her chair, the full weight of what she'd lost crashing down upon her. Not just a career opportunity, not just a revolutionary project, but something far more precious. A connection she had never expected to find, now shattered beyond repair. Outside her office, Dominic leaned against the wall, doubt already beginning to creep through the armor of his anger. But pride and old wounds kept him moving forward, away from her door, away from the questions her parting words had planted. By morning, both had retreated to opposite sides of San Francisco. Two brilliant minds separated by misunderstanding and manipulation, each carrying the hollow ache of what might have been. Worlds realigned. 3 months passed like a slow-motion collapse. Autumn descended on San Francisco, wrapping the city in fog and memory. Olivia had found temporary work at a small, environmental consulting firm, a position well beneath her qualifications, but one of the few available to a scientist whose name had become synonymous with corporate espionage. The Geneva presentation had been cancelled. Hartwell Innovations had issued a terse statement about re-evaluating the biological filtration initiative, effectively burying the project. The business world quickly moved on to the next innovation, the next controversy, the next rising star. Only Olivia remained fixated on what had been lost. Not the project, though that pain was acute, but the trust that had been shattered, the connection severed before it had fully formed. She sat at her modest desk, reviewing environmental impact assessments for a local construction company, when her phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. "Have you seen the news? Julian Ferris named interim CEO of Hartwell Innovations. Dominic stepping down for personal reasons." Olivia's heart stuttered. Despite everything, the thought of Dominic relinquishing the company he had built from nothing felt fundamentally wrong. It wasn't like him to surrender, especially to Julian. Her fingers hovered over the phone, tempted to respond, to ask questions. Instead, she set it aside. Whatever was happening at Hartwell was no longer her concern. Yet as evening approached, restlessness drove her from her apartment. She found herself walking aimlessly along the Embarcadero, the same stretch of waterfront where she and Dominic had been headed on that stormy night that changed everything. The restaurant, Lunetta, appeared ahead, its warm lights beckoning against the gathering darkness. On impulse, she stepped inside, requesting a table for one. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the hostess apologized, "but we're fully booked tonight unless—" She paused, checking her reservation system. "We do have one cancellation. The Hartwell table." Olivia froze. "The Hartwell table?" "Mr. Hartwell has a standing Friday reservation, but his assistant canceled about an hour ago. It's a private alcove with a bay view, more space than you need alone. But if you don't mind, and I'll take it," Olivia said, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. The universe had a strange sense of humor, seating her at his table, surrounding her with echoes of a conversation they'd never had. She ordered absently, her thoughts swirling with what-ifs and might-have-beens. As the waiter brought her wine, a commotion at the entrance drew her attention. Dominic stood in the doorway, looking less composed than she had ever seen him. Hair slightly disheveled, tie loosened, a day's stubble shadowing his jaw. "I know my assistant canceled," he was telling the flustered hostess, "but I've changed my mind. I'll take my usual table." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Hartwell, but we've already seated another guest there." Dominic's shoulders slumped slightly. "Of course. My apologies for the confusion." As he turned to leave, his gaze swept across the restaurant and locked with Olivia's. For a moment, neither moved, the crowded room seeming to fade away around them. Then, surprising herself, Olivia raised her hand in a small gesture of acknowledgement. After a heartbeat's hesitation, Dominic crossed the room to her table. "This is, he began. "Serendipitous," she offered, echoing his word from months ago. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I was going to say unexpected, but yes, serendipitous works too." He gestured to the empty chair across from her. "May I?" She nodded, composing her features into a neutral expression that belied the chaos of emotions beneath. "I heard about your resignation," she said once he was seated. "Or was it a coup?" "A strategic retreat," he corrected, his eyes never leaving hers. "And long overdue." Silence stretched between them, laden with unspoken words. Finally, Dominic spoke. "You were right," he said simply. "About Julian. About everything." Olivia's grip tightened on her wineglass. "What happened? After you left, I did what you suggested. I asked questions." His voice was low, intense. "The genetic sequences Julian presented as evidence, they weren't proprietary nexus modifications at all, just as you said. They were standard water hyacinth genes manipulated to look incriminating. How did you discover this?" "I hired an independent geneticist to verify the claims." A shadow of regret crossed his face. "Something I should have done immediately instead of reacting." Olivia absorbed this. The vindication hollow after so much damage had been done. And Julian? Once I started investigating, the whole scheme unraveled. Julian had been secretly negotiating with Nexus for months. They offered him a controlling interest if he could deliver certain Hartwell technologies. His jaw tightened. Your project was collateral damage, a test of his influence over me and the board. So you exposed him? I was going to, Dominic said, surprising her. I had all the evidence compiled, ready to present to the board. Then I realized something. He leaned forward. Hartwell Innovations had become exactly what Thomas criticized, a company where profit and power overshadowed purpose. Julian was a symptom, not the disease. So you walked away, Olivia said, understanding dawning. I resigned as CEO but retained controlling interest in the company. Julian's promotion is temporary, a necessary step while I restructure the entire organization from the ground up. For the first time in months, she saw genuine passion in his eyes. Hartwell is being reborn as something better. The waiter approached, asking if Dominic wanted to order. He waved the man away, his attention fixed solely on Olivia. That still doesn't explain why you're here tonight, she said once they were alone again. Your assistant canceled your reservation. Because I was planning to find you, he admitted. I've spent 3 months rebuilding my company. Now I need to repair what matters more. The simple declaration hung in the air between them, vulnerable and honest. You believed the worst of me, Olivia said softly, without question, without hesitation. Yes. He didn't try to defend himself. I've spent my life expecting betrayal, building walls so high that when someone finally scaled them, he shook his head. I panicked. I retreated to familiar ground. Suspicion, isolation, control. That's not much of an apology, she observed, though without rancor. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he replied. Not yet. I'm asking for a chance to earn it. From his jacket he withdrew a small flash drive. Your research, all of it. Untouched, preserved exactly as you left it. He placed it on the table between them. And this, he handed her an envelope. Inside was an official document on Hartwell Innovations' letterhead, a formal retraction of all allegations against Dr. Olivia Reed, acknowledging the company's error and confirming her complete vindication. It's been published in every major scientific journal and business publication, Dominic added. Your professional reputation is restored. Olivia stared at the document, emotions warring within her. And what about the project itself? That depends on you, his voice softened. I've established a new division, Hartwell Environmental Solutions. Independent funding, autonomous operation, complete intellectual freedom. It needs a director. Hope flickered dangerously in her chest. And who would I report to in this new division? No one, he said simply. The position comes with a seat on the reorganized board. You'd be my equal, not my employee. The magnitude of the offer stunned her. Why? After everything that happened. Because your work deserves to exist in the world, he interrupted. Because millions of people deserve access to clean water. And because he hesitated, then committed to honesty. Because I've never stopped thinking about what could have been. That night when the storm changed our course. Outside, as if summoned by his words, rain began to fall, gentle drops tapping against the windows. Olivia watched the patterns they made, buying time to process the tumult of emotions his presence had stirred back to life. I need time, she finally said, to think. To be certain. Of course, he agreed, though disappointment flickered briefly in his eyes. He stood, placing a business card beside her plate. My private number. When you've decided, whatever you decide, I'd like to hear it from you directly. As he turned to leave, Olivia called after him. Dominic. He paused, looking back. That night in your home, you asked if there was an us. I never answered. And now? He asked quietly. Now I think that question still needs an answer, she said. But not tonight. Not yet. He nodded, understanding in his eyes, and walked away. 1 week later, Olivia stood in the familiar lobby of Hartwell Tower, heart racing as the elevator climbed toward the executive floor. The security badge clipped to her blazer felt strange. A visitor's pass. Not the employee credential she'd once carried. The doors opened directly into what had been Dominic's private office, now transformed. The imposing desk was gone, replaced by a circular conference table. The formerly stark walls now displayed photographs of Hartwell environmental initiatives around the world, alongside framed botanical illustrations. Dominic stood by the windows, gazing out at the city. He turned as she entered. hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. "You came," he said simply. "I did," she confirmed, moving to stand beside him at the window. "I've been thinking about what you said. About purpose, about rebuilding, about second chances. And?" His voice was carefully neutral, though she could sense the tension beneath. Olivia reached into her bag and withdrew a folder. "My counter-proposal for Hartwell Environmental Solutions. I've made some modifications to the organizational structure and expanded the scope beyond water filtration." Surprise and admiration registered on his face as he skimmed the document. "This is extremely ambitious. Is that a problem?" she challenged. "On the contrary," he said, a genuine smile forming. "It's exactly what I'd expect from you." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the city stretching below them, possibilities expanding outward like ripples. "There's one condition I need to address," Olivia said finally, "something not covered in the proposal." "Name it." She turned to face him fully. "Whatever happens between us personally, whether we explore what began that night or decide to remain strictly professional colleagues, it cannot affect the work. The mission comes first." "Agreed," he said without hesitation. "The work is too important." "Good." She offered her hand formally. "Then I accept the position, Mr. Hartwell." He took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he held it gently. "Welcome to the new Hartwell." Dr. Reed, their eyes met, and in that moment, both recognized that some collisions in life aren't accidents at all but alignments. Planets drawn into mutual orbit, separate worlds finding their shared center of gravity. "So," Olivia said, her voice softening, "about that question you asked." "Which one?" Dominic asked, though his eyes told her he knew exactly which question she meant. "Is there an us, Dominic?" His fingers tightened slightly around hers. "What's your hypothesis, Dr. Reed?" "That some experiments require time," she replied, stepping closer. "That some results can't be rushed." "A methodical approach," he nodded, his free hand moving hesitantly to brush a strand of hair from her face. "I approve." "I thought you might," she said, smiling as she closed the remaining distance between them. Outside, the San Francisco fog began to lift, sunlight breaking through to illuminate the bay. Below, the city continued its endless rhythm. Above, in an office transformed by purpose and possibility, two brilliant minds who had once collided by accident now chose their convergence with clear eyes and open hearts. Two separate worlds, realigning into something stronger than either could be alone. And in the laboratory, 42 floors below, the plants in Olivia's filtration system continued their silent, essential work, transforming what was tainted into something pure and life-sustaining, proof that with patience and the right conditions, renewal is always possible.